True Crime 49 is an Alaskan true crime podcast, the original Gothic Veritas.
Welcome to True Crime 49.
We're finally excited to be back. A lot of things have happened. One of the things we've been working on, we've published a book, Joe Millionaire, of course, a true crime story. It takes place in Anchorage, Alaska. Essentially, it's season 2 of the podcast. If you wanted to, preview it or go and listen to it, the book is for sale, of course, on Amazon. I think it's a wonderful story. We've put a lot of work into it. We were diligent in the research, and it's something that you know when you read it, it's going to be very exciting, and you know that every single bit of it is true. Joe Millionaire by TC49. I would if I was you, I would listen to it and maybe even buy the book I enjoy reading it just as much, maybe even more than I enjoy hearing it.
The last podcast we did was in December of 2021, and it was of Anesha Duffy Murnane, who was abducted in October of 2019 as she was walking to an appointment in Homer, Alaska. And, they searched for her for several years, and a jury pronounced her dead in June of 2021. There hasn't been any activity on the case until May 2022, just this last Monday. Authorities arrested Kirby Calderwood, 32, of Ogden, Utah, and charging him in Alaska with first and second degree murder, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. Kirby Calderwood has been arrested as the main suspect in Duffy Murnane's disappearance. Special investigator Matt Haney, we mentioned in the previous podcast, identified Calderwood as a potential suspect in May of 2021, a month before they pronounced her deceased. Calderwood was employed by South Peninsula Behavioral Services, and that's the mental health agency that runs the apartment that Duffy was residing at the time of her disappearance. And apparently he had, over a span of time, he fulfilled a couple of different jobs for South Peninsula Behavioral Services and came in contact with Duffy enough to even have shared meals with her in the past.
In the podcast, we've discussed what happened with Duffy, and we also brainstormed trying to think what are the possibilities of what could have happened to her. April of this year, a tip came in. And the law enforcement, when they were processing it, they immediately knew that there were things that the tipster called in about and had reference to that was not public knowledge. No one should have known about those things unless they were either there or the person that was there told them about it specifically. And when they compared what the tipster said with what they know, the tipster had mentioned in particular a watch that Kirby Calderwood, the suspect who was arrested, he kept, and he had a missing poster of Duffy Murnane, an actual missing poster with her watch, and he told her about it. He at some point he confessed to her, which also maybe sounds like it's a way of manipulating her not to leave or to have absolute control over her, for her to know. If he wanted her to know, either he felt guilty, which it doesn't seem that way by his actions, or he was manipulating her to frighten her to where she would be basically terrified, which to never leave. Because it lines up that several previous partners that they've spoke to so far, as they have looked at the web of people around him, and essentially his past intimate partners, ex-wife even, as they went and they investigated these previous partners, they spoke of his sexual fantasies and of them personally being sexually assaulted by their husband or their boyfriend at the time, that Kirby would actually sexually assault them as an intimate partner. They said that he fantasized about torturing and killing someone. One of the women mentioned Calderwood's hurting of animals since he was a child. The parents of his then-girlfriend at the time when he was in Homer and Duffy went missing, her parents were out of town from October all the way through to December. As we mentioned in the episode, Duffy's father had given a large a talk that he had given to roughly 70-some people from the community. And the next morning, they were going to Mexico. And so you see how that's kind of a normal thing in a seasonal town like Homer. Kirby Calderwood, the one in custody, his girlfriend at the time, her parents were out of town, and he knew that they were out of town. He had went to their house and constructed a place to torture someone in their crawl space, is what the report says. He pulled up and he offered Duffy a ride to her appointment. He was driving a blue Subaru Forester. He claimed that he needed a phone charger, and making a short detour up the side of the mountain, essentially, still in town, raising an elevation, going up away from the heart of downtown Homer to the house, with the ruse of I need to retrieve my phone charger. In the episode, we discussed it from the time she left her apartment, which Kirby worked for several years, that company, and even shared meals with her. Such an eerie thing. As they drive up the hill, there would have been plenty enough time. She had 45 minutes to walk from her apartment, to her appointment. 45 minutes is a long time to walk across Homer, very short distance to where she was going. So going up the hill, he takes her to a strange house, but it's okay because I need to pick up the phone charger. Apparently, he had enough closeness with her that she actually went into the house, by his own admission, went into the house with him. And he had the crawl space door opened. And basically, once they got near the crawl space door, he attacked her. And up until that moment, maybe she felt weird, maybe she was scared, but up until that moment, he makes it sound as if she had no idea what was going on. And he attacks her and drags her into the crawl space.
More graphic things have occurred to her that we chose not to speak of.
Yes.
And I'm sure you can look them up online, but a lot of it actually we don't know for sure, though, until it becomes public, the specifics of how she died and what he did to her. We wouldn't examine at this point.
Yes. When you're talking about these things with actually true crime, you're actually talking about crimes that are happening. It's very easy to get excited when things break loose into a case, and when the news comes out that they've arrested someone, and you get all the answers to all the questions that you pondered over and over again, hoping that you could decode it maybe and make a call and say, I figured it out who it is. Once those answers are there, it's so easy to get excited about the good news. In this case in particular, even the good news isn't good news anyway. Mm-hmm. And we of course analyzing things later, but as you said, now is a time to show respect to her and her family. When it comes time to, hopefully, you would be hoping that he would reveal the location of where she is, that she could be retrieved for her, for her family and for her parents and for her. He said that he placed her into plastic bags and into a fish tote, and then placed her in a dumpster that he could view it. And we'll go in, at some point analyzing how long did he wait, because the whole town was hot with police department and dogs even.
We know who it is, but we can't examine all of the pieces yet. They're coming to us one by one. One of the things that we do know is that Calderwood originally is from Utah. His brother was a charter fisherman who worked in Homer, and he had recently overdosed. Calderwood had come up for his brother's memorial service, and he ended up staying in Alaska for the next 6 years. He left Alaska in June of 2021, which was the same month that they declared Duffy Murnane deceased by homicide. That was headed up by Special Investigator Matt Haney, who had already identified Kirby Calderwood as a potential suspect, and then with the tipster's information, that provided enough for them to get several search warrants for his house, his car, his DNA. When they searched his home, Duffy's watch was found there, and as well as the missing poster with her photo on it. This is just preliminary. We don't know. Maybe he had other people's trophies, or maybe this was a one-time thing. I do know that there were several items of interest at his home.
Something that's very interesting in the episode about Duffy, we speak about the helicopters, we speak about the dog teams, we speak about them applying the silver alert. Even though they didn't know where she was, they still had it classified as a homicide. All of those steps that you see the law enforcement and essentially the search and rescue people doing is amazing and outstanding. It's what you'd want to have happen every time. And so it follows suit that when they would arrest him, they arrest him in the exact same manner that they arrested BTK. They arrest him in the same manner that they arrested Robert Kuklinski, the Iceman. The protocol of watching them, having surveillance on them, knowing exactly how many other collateral people are in the house, and waiting for them to get into their vehicle and drive away and then swoop in on him as a regular traffic stop. And then quickly it escalates into a felony arrest. And that way they are not at the house, not near their guns, not near their hidden cache of weapons, not near people who could be used as hostages, or people, Ryan Andrews in Alaska with Hans Roll. Ryan Andrews, we used to fire on him, on the state trooper, and on himself and his family members. And so they arrest him in his vehicle. When they begin to search into the vehicle, once he is in custody and detained, they go into the vehicle and they find inside the vehicle with him 2 rifles. And at the time, he had a protective order on him that barred him from even having guns, much less in his possession. When they go to the house, they find, besides the watch and near the poster, they find a machete and several large knives. A number of them, they appear to have dried blood on them. This person has dark sexual fantasies. They fantasize about hurting people and in a sexual manner. And a person who went through with something like this, and a lot of times when someone starts doing these things, in the statistics, they usually start with very, very low rung sex workers off the street with nowhere to go. To see someone who is apparently discriminating enough that they are going to choose a victim that is essentially a townsperson, a good person, a good girl. Number one, to see him do something like that, usually that's not something that usually someone starts off with. And you hear about these fantasies, you hear about the ex-wife, you hear about the new girlfriend. On an interview on the radio station called Homer is Home, he speaks of going to Homer when his brother had passed away, going to Homer for his memorial. And what it appears is, looking at all the other things about him, he mentions identity in the 30 seconds that he's speaking. He mentions identity, and he mentions of going to the bars where he never was there with his brother. We know that. But he says that when he basically kind of absorbed into this void of where his brother people used to know his brother at the bar. When he saw that his brother was gone and everyone is, we feeling bad for him, he just soaked into that void and created this whole other identity. I believe his words are, he cultured his identity there. This is the person who was just arrested. This is the person who had guns and rifles in their car while they're being arrested that they're not supposed to have because of a protection order. Is the person who has the bloody knives in his house.
Well, I guess a little bit of who he is Kirby Calderwood is one of 7 children, one of the second youngest. He was born January 14th, 1990 in Provo, Utah, to LDS parents, or Latter-day Saint parents, who were also raised in Utah. He has a very strong family lineage in Utah and of Latter-day Saint. He participated in several sports and he earned his Eagle Scout. I believe all of his brothers are Eagle Scouts, including Connor, who passed away. And then he went on to join the Army. From September 2009 to November 2011, he was the unit supply specialist in the Army, and he spent 1 year in Iraq. Then in 2017, he joined the Army Reserves for 9 months. There's not a lot of history with his other things that pop up as far as work history and or anything like a dedicated career, although that after 2017, after the Army Reserves, we do know that he went to Homer and worked for the Behavioral Health Services.
It is very interesting that it seems that Kirby Calderwood has a number of similarities to other Alaska serial killers or other people who have committed these type of crimes, sadistic sexual crimes in Alaska. Of course, Robert Hansen was the Boy Scout. Mm-hmm. It appears that his fantasies began while he was a Boy Scout, and he even spoke of it. It's interesting that he is an Eagle Scout. All of his brothers are Eagle Scouts. A lot of times when all the family's Eagle Scouts, a lot of times the parents are involved. And much like Robert Hansen, that was a component. That was a huge component of his childhood. Mm-hmm. That he told his wife, he bragged to his wife, just the same that Kirby is. He bragged to his wife that he would cheat on everything he could. He didn't want to earn the badge. And she said he was so able, he could do it if he wanted to, anything he wanted. He flew a plane with no license. He loved watching them sign it off, knowing he cheated in the entire book. Kirby has that similarity. All of his brothers are Eagle Scouts. Mm-hmm. A life inside of that type of lifestyle. He also is very similar to Israel Keys. Israel Keys' family, among other religious names that you could put on them, at one stage, they were definitely Latter-day Saints, the mm-hmm. Mormon Church. And of course, how many religions are out there? Everyone's going to be from some background. It just so happens that the only similarity I'm making is that Israel Keys was from a large family that was Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. Kirby Calderwood is from a large family that is Latter-day Saints. Mm-hmm. And the reason why I mentioned the starting point is there's other similarities there. He goes to the military. Mm-hmm. Kirby says that he was a supply specialist. Israel Keys says in interviews by his own voice that the Army is the only branch that will take a lot of the people that were people like that he saw in where he was at in infantry and where Kirby would be in supply. Having a role, going into the Army and it not developing into a career, not developing into some type of something substantial, it petering out, and really having no real work record, not really having a history, like you said, and just popping up in the middle of Homer, surrounded by people who are doting on him, essentially, mm-hmm. and he gets a job at the Behavioral Health Center.
His younger brother passed away in January of 2017, and it would be 2 years later that Duffy Murnane would go missing. We would be searching for her for the next 3 years until we are today. Kirby is in custody, and hopefully we'll find out more about what's happened. And some of the things from the previous episode I thought were very interesting as we were kind of looking at what we know now. One of the things that you kept focusing on was that the economy is seasonal, that the town goes quiet after, Labor Day. And really, that is something that Calderwood took advantage of.
In the episode when we're talking about the season, Homer's a seasonal town, the feel of him recognizing that the town is the energy in the town is decreasing. So many eyes mm-hmm. that were there just a while ago, that while they're there, there's these web of interactions that they have with people, and they drink with so-and-so and they laugh around the fire with so-and-so. And then when they disappear, that entire web of eyes and connective saying, did you hear about such and such? It disappears. And as a certain percentage of this town is flashing here or gone, to have him, the way he must have viewed that house, that he saw that there was an opportunity, and it's very interesting. In the episode, we talk about the seasonal, about how it feels as these waves of people are coming in and out and how it feels. And that the bad people would recognize that in a town like this, that you could do it once at least. You could be invisible. And it appears, that's what's so eerie, is that it appears, as we were talking about that's exactly what he did.
You had mentioned about maybe it would be somebody, that maybe it was somebody who was here. Maybe they saved up their money. Maybe they didn't, but they were going to indulge themselves. And it kind of sounds like if this is something that he had talked about before, that he wanted to torture somebody and murder somebody, that this would be an indulgence. And so as an outsider, he probably felt that he was much more unseen than he was. It was an opportunity, and that's something you had mentioned before.
One of the things that you had mentioned that strikes me every time is when you say if you went there for your son's wedding. And it's so eerie that it wasn't for her son's wedding. It was for her son's memorial. And in the episode, we say to go look in the photos, that you could have went there. Mm-hmm. You could have photos in your album. And in the episode, we say that maybe in the background is the abduction that the dogs and the dog handlers said happened. In reality, the right way to say it is, you went there for your son's memorial. And in your photos, there is the murderer, and it's your son. There are things that you brought up in particular about the victimology. You asked people to consider if there's someone you know that they have maybe an obsession about a woman who kind of looks like that girl, Duffy Murnane. Is the people around him, you mentioned Ted Bundy, his mom, which was actually his sister, influenced the concept in his mind of what he wanted or what he wanted to destroy. And all of the photos lined up look very much similar to his sister, who's actually his mom. He was raised by his grandma. When you look through the photos that they took, when you look through the photos that she took at her son's memorial, all of those things are in that photo.
Kirby Calderwood's mother and sisters, you slap a pair of Helly Hansons on them with their hair in braids, they do look strikingly like Duffy Murnane. Unfortunately, along with that, like you said, the good girl, I do think that if their family was in the church for a long time, they probably would be church folk and be kind. And just like Duffy, there's no way that she would have gotten in a car with somebody strange. She would have known them. That's something that we kind of kept focusing on. She knew who took her. In the video, or there's a radio clip that it's on our Instagram, the one that you mentioned, you hear Kirby Calderwood's voice, and it's very soft and almost feminine. To have that person in a little blue Subaru Forester come up and offer you a ride, and you know that they're a safe place because that's where the place that you live is a safe place, and the place where you eat is a safe place, and he offers you a ride. That is so it's so sad, because she wasn't the type of person to just be all willy-nilly. She was very cautious, and that somebody took advantage of that and hit all of the right chords.
His previous partners all said that he has been violent to them, violent of things that they've seen. Him bragging, or even torturing animals, killing animals in front of them, or gloating over it.
If he had, let's just say he did sexually assault his wife or his ex-wife and his girlfriend, they were family members that didn't report it for whatever reason. But if he had sexually assaulted somebody outside of his home, he could have already done 10 to 15 years at different times and had a record. So this isn't his first time being violent to a woman. It's just that this is the first time he was violent to a woman outside of his family, that we know of, and that there could be as soon as it was posted on Instagram, one of the first things that comments that were made was that this seems awfully suspicious that for this to be his first time. How many people do you know make a crawl space torture chamber if they've never done anything like that before?
One thing that's interesting is that, as we said in the episode, her phone has never been discovered. And from the time that they know that she was walking and was in control of herself, that her phone never called or pinged. Once she disappeared, her phone never called or pinged and never received any calls or pings. It's interesting that from the downtown area or down by the water where they were, to go up the hill, up into the residential area, and never worrying that her phone is going to ping. Apparently savvy enough to know that the cellular network around Homer isn't a giant metropolitan area with enough cell towers to triangulate locations, really. To have enough savvy or at least be comfortable enough to have her with a live, active cell phone in her pocket, pinging the entire time. And to drive her up there to that next location, that if they could track phones down to the square inch or even to the square foot, he would have led them directly to where the crime scene actually was. The crimes being first-degree murder, second-degree murder, kidnapping, and tampering with evidence. So he apparently was savvy enough to know that even though they're going to know that her phone was in Homer, they're not going to be able to put any type of circumference of where it was. It's just going to be that it was there.
The blanket Homer.
And he knew that.
And one of the things, too, is that he had said, I don't know, to the girlfriend or to whoever, that he hadn't planned on killing her and that he was just out looking for a victim. If that was the case, then why did he construct a crawl space? If it was happenstance, then why would he have an area to take somebody if he hadn't planned on killing them, keeping them, or whatever? The same thing with the cell phone. He did certain countermeasures, but eventually when he did leave the house, he disposed of her phone in Beluga Lake. And we had talked about that too. How would you disable a phone?
At one point, that's what we were saying, was that if the cell phone was in a state that it will not even receive a message, it will not receive a ping, then either one of two things have happened. Either someone has pulled out the battery or that the circuits are overcome by water. Eventually, as the things come out in the case against him, what happened? What has happened? What have you done? What is your progression been from being a kid who his parents and his partners recognized that he loved to hurt animals? Maybe he liked to we don't know if he liked to set fires. We don't know if he peed the bed every night. We hopefully, as we learn what type of person he is, it might give us insights into other killers, and particularly Israel Keys, because the element of building the torture chamber down in their basement, right? He's doing it to them. He's creating a victim to them, and he's setting it up so that instead of doing it in a tent in the middle of the woods that you're going to just burn it when you're done, he's setting it up so that he can savor it later. Yeah. When they're looking at him. And building it, a lot of times you see, especially with Israel Keys, you see that by building the torture chamber is maybe even a way of daring yourself, just getting close. You're not really going to do it. And that's exactly what he told the girl, his girlfriend. I wasn't really going to do it, but I did the thing, and I built the box, and I set it up. And maybe he's done this before. He might have actually daring yourself closer to the edge. Yeah. But then he's actually driving around town. The empty house for 2 months probably being the driving factor of it's so perfect. Yeah. So I'm just going to daydream some more. Fantasies. They talk about fantasies becoming the obsession. And he's, I'm just going to satiate myself by doing these things, and I don't have to actually do it, but I'm going to dare myself right to the edge. And here comes a girl who looks like his sisters, It's a girl who's probably, like you said, he's familiar with her and knows how to strike those chords where she lets her guard down. Not lets her guard down enough to go on a date with him. Lets her guard down only enough to go up into and walk into that house with the guy that she used to eat with at the behavioral health center where she lives. And so when it comes out, hopefully, the nuances of who this person was, it will give us a Rosetta Stone type of a key for us to look at other people who are very similar to this and maybe see traits that that's why they built the thing, because just like he built his little torture chamber.
Somebody on Facebook changed his Facebook. Interesting that they chose for to replace his profile picture as a picture of him, and it looks like his squad in the army, and they have their squad leader tied up
Or duct taped
to
a telephone-sized barrel up at an angle.
And the entire squad's below them, and it looks like some sort of prank or something, but it's Kirby is front and center, and he kind of looks like, and I try to be respectful and everything, but as an example, I feel like he looked a little bit like Gomer Pyle from Full Metal Jacket. A little devious, a little off-kilter, front and center with their squad leader duct tape up in the air. If I had done something that was going to make the news, or something horrible that involved killing and murdering somebody, I definitely would not put a picture of somebody tied up above me. I don't know what his family was thinking, or how that's supposed to actually, how much better that picture is than whatever profile picture he had before. But it's just interesting that they chose that one.
I would like to say that our condolences to her family. Like I said, this is a story to where we don't know what happened to her, and if you look into it, everything you're seeing so far, you don't want to look into it, really.
Yeah. We do feel for her family. This would be a good time to mention Myles Colt Williams, who went missing in Big Lake during 4th of July 2021. He's still missing. We heard that the lake is thaw, and they have resumed searches for him in Big Lake. But again, if you have photos, look at the photos. If there's anything you've heard, call the police department there. And again, we want to just make sure with Duffy Murnane, it wasn't positive, but at least they found who did it, working towards recovering her body. The same thing with Myles Williams. We'd like to be able to make the similar headway for his family as well. Thank you for listening to this podcast. And again, if you have an opportunity, look up our new book, Joe Millionaire, available on Amazon by True Crime 49. True Crime 49 is an Alaskan true crime podcast, the original Gothic Veritas. Thank you for listening to True Crime 49. You can find us online and on most social media platforms at TC49 Podcast. Support the show by sharing the podcast and rating.